Alright, so if you're watching this video on my stream or my Twitch channel, you can support it by following, subscribing, either by using your credit card and paying $4.99 a month, or using your Twitch Prime option that is given to you by your Amazon Prime subscription on this channel. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Boianover, top left corner of the screen. You can see it, how it's spelled. You can also join the Discord server. Gonna have to, you just look down below in the information panel and you'll see the link. I had to remember to fix it, but it is there. Also, if you are kind enough, you can help us with the donation goal we have that is going on until the end of the year. It's for $500. We have 0 so far, but I trust that some of you guys are going to be kind enough to help me with that, because it's not easy to keep a stream going, man. No, even harder without anybody that keeps you in hand with the economics. And as you see, I'm not a pretty girl, so that's not easy to accomplish. So, having that said, let's just start with our reading. It's part 10. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell button. Part 10. He came out of his hiding place about 2 hours later, dirtier than ever, but a little refreshed. Incredibly, as it seemed to him, he had dozed off. When he had heard the 3 of them behind him, coming after him still, Ben had come dangerously close to freezing up completely, like an animal caught in the headlamps of an oncoming truck. A paralytic drowsiness began to steal over him. The idea of simply lying down, curling up into a ball like a hedgehog and letting them do whatever they felt they had to occurred to him. It was a crazy idea, but it also seemed like a strangely good idea. But instead, Ben began to move toward the sound of the running water and those other kids. He tried to untangle their voices and get the sense of what they were saying. Anything to shake off that scary paralysis of the spirit. Some project. They were talking about some project. 1 or 2 of the voices were even a little familiar. There was a splash, followed by a burst of good-natured laughter. The laughter filled Ben with a kind of stupid longing, and made him more aware of his dangerous position than anything else had done. He came to a narrow path which had been beaten down to the bare earth. Ben considered it for a moment, then shook his head a little. He crossed it and plunged into the undergrowth again. He moved more slowly now, pushing bushes aside rather than stampeding through them. He was still moving roughly parallel to the stream. The other kids had been playing beside. Even though the intervening bushes and trees, he could see it was much wider than the one into which he and Henry had fallen. Here was another of those concrete cylinders, barely visible, amid a snarl of blackberry creepers. humming quietly to itself. Beyond, an embankment dropped off to the stream, and here an old gnarled elm tree leaned crookedly out over the water. Its roots, half exposed by bank erosion, looked like a snarl of dirty hair. Hoping there wouldn't be bugs or snakes, but too tired and numbly frightened to really care, Ben had worked his way between the roots and into a shallow cave beneath the lindback. He leaned back. A root jabbed him like an angry finger. He shifted his position a little, and it supported him quite nicely. Here came Henry, Bulk, and Victor. He had thought they might be fooled into following the path, but no such luck. They stood close by him for a moment, any closer, and he could have reached out his hiding place. Any closer, and he could have reached out of his hiding place and touched them. Bet them little snot holes back there saw him, Buck said. Well, let's go find out, Henry replied, and they headed back to the way they headed back the way they had come. A few moments later, Ben heard him roar, What the fuck you kids doing here? There was some sort of reply, but Ben couldn't tell what it was. The kids were too far away, and this close the river, what the Candace kick, of course, was too loud. But he thought the kid sounded scared. Ben could sympathize. Here. Then Victor cries, "Hello, Wood!" Something Ben hadn't understood at all. What a fucking baby dam! Baby dam? Or maybe Victor had said, "What a damn bunch of babies," and Ben had misheard him. Let's break it, Beck proposed. There were yells of protest, followed by a scream of pain. Someone began to cry. Yes, Ben could sympathize. They hadn't been able to catch him, at least not yet, but there was another bunch of little kids for them to take out their mad on. Sure, break it, Henry said. Flashes, yells, big moronic gusts of laughter from Belk and Victor, an agonizing, infuriated cry from one of the little kids. Don't give me any of your shit, you stubborn little freak, Henry Bowers said. I ain't talking no more shit from nobody today. I ain't talking nobody more shit from nobody. There was a splintering crack, the sound of running water downstream. It grew louder and roared briefly before quieting to its former placid chuckle. Ben suddenly understood. Baby damn, yes, that was what Victor had said. The kids, 2 or 3 of them, it had sounded like when he passed by, had been building a dam. Henry and his friends had just kicked it apart. Ben even thought he knew who one of the kids was. The only stuttering little freak he knew from their right school was Bill Denbrough, who was in the other 5th grade classroom. You didn't have to do that, a thin and fearful voice cried out, and Ben recognized that voice as well, although he could not immediately put a face with it. Why did you do that? Because I felt like it. Fucknuts, Henry roared back. There was a meaty thud. It was followed by a scream of pain. The scream was followed by weeping. Shut up, Victor said. Shut up and shut up that crying, kid, or I'll pull your ears down and tie them under your chin. The crying became a series of choked snuffles. We're going, Henry said. But before we do, I want to know one thing. You seen a fat kid in the last 10 minutes or so? Big fat kid, all bloody and cut up? There was a reply too brief to be anything but no. You sure? Buck asked. You better be, Bushmott. I'm sure, Bill Denbrough replied. Let's go, Henry said. He probably waded across back that way. The top boys, Victor Chris called. It was a real baby dam, believe me. You're better off without it. Flashing sounds, Buck's voice came again, but farther away now. Ben couldn't make out the words. In fact, he didn't want to make out the words. Closer by, the boy who had been crying now resumed. There were comforting noises from the other boy. Ben had decided there was just the two of them, Southern Bill and the Whipper. He half sat, half lay where he was, listening to the two boys by the river and the fading sound of Henry and his dinosaur friends crashing toward the far side of the barrens. Sunlight flicked at his eyes and made little coins of light on the tangled roots above and around him. It was dirty in here, but it was also cozy, safe. The sound of running water was soothing. Even the sound of the crying kid was sort of soothing. His aches and pains had faded to a dull throb, and the sound of the dinosaurs had faded out completely. He would wait a while, just to be sure they weren't coming back, and then he would make tracks. Ben could hear the throb of the drainage machinery coming through the earth. He could even feel it, a low, steady vibration that went from the ground to the root he was leaning against, and then into his back. He thought of the Morlocks again, of their naked flesh. He imagined it would smell like that, like the dank and shitty air that had come up through the vent holes of that iron cap. He thought of their wells, driving deep into the earth, walls with rusty ladders bolted to their sides. He dozed, and at some point his thoughts became a dream. Or 11. It wasn't Morlocks he dreamed of. He dreamed of the thing which had happened to him in January, the thing which he hadn't quite been able to tell his mother. It had been the first day of school after a long Christmas break. Mrs. Douglas had asked for a volunteer to stay after and help her count the books that had been turned in just before the vacation. Ben had raised his hand. Thank you, Ben, Mrs. Douglas had said, favoring him with a smile of such brilliance that it warmed him down to his toes. Suck ass, Henry Bowers remarked under his breath. It had been the sort of midwinter day that is both the best and the worst. Cloudless, eye-watering bright, but so cold it was a little frightening. To make the 10-degree temperature worse, there was a strong wind to give the cold a bitter cutting edge. Ben counted books and called out numbers. Mrs. Douglas wrote them down, not bothering to double check his work even on a random basis. He was proud to note. And then they both carried the box down to the storage room through halls where radiators clanked grimly. At first, the school had been full of sounds, slamming locker doors, the clackety-clack of Mrs. Thomas' typewriter in the office, the slightly off-key choral renditions of the Glee Club upstairs, the nervous thud of basketballs from the gym, and the scrunch and thud of sneakers as players drove toward the baskets or cut turns on the polished wood floor. Little by little, those sounds ceased until, as the last set of books was touched up, one short but it hardly mattered, Mrs. Douglas sighed. They were all holding together on a wink and a prayer. The only sound were the radiators, and the faint whoosh of Mr. Fazio's broom as he pushed colored sawdust up the hall floor, and the howl of the wind outside. Ben looked toward the books room, one narrow window, and saw that the light was fading rapidly from the sky. It was 4 o'clock and dusk was at hand. Membranes of dry snow blew around the icy jungle gym and swirled between the teeter-totters, which were frozen solidly into the ground. Only the thaws of April would break those bitter winter wells. He saw no one at all on Jackson Street. He looked a moment longer, expecting a car to roll through the Jackson Witchman's intersection, but none did. Everyone in the ride, save himself and Mrs. Douglas, might be dead or fled, at least from what he could see from here. He looked toward her and saw, with a touch of real fright, that she was feeling almost exactly the same thing he was feeling himself. He could tell by the look in her eyes. They were deep and thoughtful and far off, not the eyes of a schoolteacher in her 40s, but those of a child. Her hands were folded just below her breast in a prayer, as if in prayer. I'm scared, Ben thought, and she's scared too, but what are we scared of? He didn't know. Then she looked at him and uttered a short, almost embarrassed laugh. I've kept you too late, he said. I'm sorry, Ben. That's okay. He looked down at his shoes. He loved her a little. Not with the frank, unquestioning love he had lavished on Miss Thibault, his first grade teacher, but he did love her. If I drove, I'd give you a ride, he said. But I don't. My husband's going to pick me up around 5:15. If you care to wait, we could. No thanks, Ben said. I ought to get home before then. This was not really the truth, but he felt a queer aversion to the idea of meeting Mrs. Douglas' husband. I'm at page 141 out of 742. It's quite a while. Almost a third chapter. A miracle. Maybe your mother called. She doesn't drive either, Ben said. I'll be alright. It's only a mile home. A mile, a mile is not far when it's nice, but it can be very long way in this weather. It is. It is a very long book. Uh, uh, you go on somewhere if it gets too cold, won't you, Ben? Oh, sure. I'll get into Costello's market and stand by the stove a little while. Or something. Mr. Gedro doesn't mind, and I got my snow pants. My new Christmas scarves too. Mrs. Douglas looked a little reassured, and then she glanced toward the window. It just looks so cold out there, she said. So inimical. He didn't know what the word. He didn't know the word, but he knew exactly what she meant. Something just happened. What? He had seen her. He realized suddenly as a person. He realized suddenly as a person instead of what? He had seen her. He realized suddenly as a person instead of just a teacher. That was what had happened. Suddenly he had seen her face in an entirely different way, and because he did, it became a new face. The face of a tired poet. He could see her going home with her husband, sitting beside him in the car with her hands folded as the heater hissed and he talked about his day. He could see her making them dinner. An odd thought crossed his mind, and a cocktail party question rose to his lips. Do you have children, Mrs. Douglas? I often think at this time of the year that people really weren't meant to live this far north of the equator, she said. At least not in this latitude. Then she smiled some. And some of the strangeness either went out of her face or his eyes. He was able to see her, at least partially, as he always had, but you'll never see her that way again, not completely, he thought, dismayed. I feel old until spring, and then I feel young again. It's that way every year. Are you sure you'll be alright, Ben? I'll be fine. Yes, I suppose you will. You're a good boy, Ben. He looked back at his dolls, blushing, loving her more than ever. In the hallway, Mr. Fazio said, "Be careful with the frostbite, boy," without looking up from his red sawdust. I will. He reached his locker, opened it, and yanked on his snow pants. He had been painfully unhappy when his mother insisted he wear them again this winter on especially cold days, thinking of them as baby clothes, but he was glad to have them this afternoon. He walked slowly toward the door, zipping his coat, yanking the drawstring of his hood tight, pulling on his mittens. He went out and stood on the snow-packed top step of the front stairs for a moment, listening as the door sneaked closed and locked behind him. The ice cooled, rooted under a bruised skin of sky. The wind blew steadily. The snap hooks on the flagpole rope rattled a lonesome tattoo against the steel pole itself. That wind cut into the warm and unprepared flesh of Ben's face at once, numbing his cheeks. Be careful with the frostbite, boy. He quickly pulled his scarf up until he looked like a small, pudgy caricature of Red Rider. That darkening sky had a fantastical sort of beauty, but Ben did not pause to admire it. It was too cold for that. He got going. At first, the wind was at his back and things didn't seem so bad. In fact, it actually seemed to be helping him along. At Canal Street, however, he had to turn right and almost fully into the wind. Now it seemed to be holding him back, as if it had business with him. The scarf helped a little, but not enough. His eyes troubled, and the moisture of his nose froze to a cracked glaze. His legs were going numb. Several times he stuck his mittened hands into his armpits to warm them up. The wind whooped and screamed, sometimes sounding almost human. Ben felt both frightened and exhilarated. Frightened because he could now understand stories he had read, such as Jack London's To Build a Fire, where people actually froze to death. It would be all too possible to freeze to death on a night like this, a night when the temperature would drop to 15 below. The exhilaration was hard to explain. It was a lonely feeling, a somehow melancholy feeling. He was outside. He passed on the wings of the wind, and none of the people beyond the brightly lighted squares of their windows saw him. They were inside where there was light and warmth. They didn't know he had passed them, only he knew. It was a secret thing. The moving air burned like needles, but it was fresh and clean. White smoke jetted from his nose in neat little streams. And as sundown came, the last of the day, a cold yellowy orange line on the western horizon, the first stars, cruel diamond chips glimmering in the sky overhead, he came to the canal. He was only 3 blocks from home now, and eager to feel the heat on his face and legs, moving the blood again, making it tingle. Still, he paused. The canal was frozen in its concrete sluice, like frozen river of rose milk. Its surface humped and cracked and cloudy. It was moveless, yet completely alive in this harshly puritanical winter light. It had its own technique and difficult beauty. Ben turned the other way, southwest, toward the barrens. When he looked in this direction, the wind was at his back again. It made his snow pants ripple and flap. The canal ran straight between its concrete walls for perhaps half a mile. Then the concrete was gone and the river sprawled its way into the barrens. At this time of the year, a skeletal wall of icy brambles and jutting naked branches. A figure was standing on the ice down there. Ben stared at it and thought, there may be a man down there, but can he be wearing what it looks like he's wearing? It's impossible, isn't it? The figure was dressed in what appeared to be a white silver clown suit. It rippled around him in the polar wind. There were oversized orange shoes on his feet. They matched the pom-pom buttons which ran down the front of his suit. One hand grasped a bundle of strings which rose to a bright bunch of balloons. And when Ben observed that the balloons were floating in his direction, He felt unreality wash over him more strongly. He closed his eyes, rubbed them, opened them. The balloons still appeared to be flowing toward him. Plus, I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's a pretty big book. I mean, 700 pages. I probably make a break when I reach the 200, the page 200, and read something else because it's just too long, man. I need to do something else, and so I can let it gain some views on my YouTube channel till I decide to get back to it, and maybe I have more people interested in it. But probably when I hit 200 views, I switch to either a French book or a Spanish book. There, I have a whole bunch of people that will be interested on listening a Spanish reading. So I don't know, depends on what we can find, what we'll do when we get to 200. The figure as dressed happens to okay. He heard Mr. Fazio voice in his head. Be careful of the frostbite, boy. It had to be a hallucination or a mirage brought on by some weird trick of the weather. There could be a man down there on the ice. He supposed it was even technically possible he could be wearing a clown suit, but the balloons couldn't be floating toward Ben into the wind. Yet that was just what they appeared to be doing. Ben, the clown on the ice, called. Ben thought that voice was only in his mind, although it seems he heard it with his ears. Want a balloon, Ben? There was something so evil in that voice, so awful, that Ben wanted to run away as fast as he could, but his feet seemed as welded to the sidewalk as the teeth others in the schoolyard were welded to the ground. They float, Ben. They all float. Try one and see. The clown began walking along the ice toward the canal bridge where Ben stood. Ben watched him come, not moving. He watched as a bird watches an approaching snake. The balloons should have burst in the intense cold, but they did not. They floated above and ahead of the clown when they should have been streaming out and behind, trying to escape back into the barrens, where some part of Ben's mind assured him this creature had come from in the first place. Now Ben noticed something else. Although the last of the daylight had struck a rusty glow across the ice of the canal, the glow casts no shadow, none at all. You like it here, Ben, the clown said. Now it was close enough so Ben could hear the chut-chut sound of its funny shoes made as they advanced over the uneven ice. You like it here, I promise. All the boys and girls I meet like it here because it's like a pleasure island in Pinocchio and then Never Neverland in Peter Pan. They never have to grow up, and that's what all the kiddies want. So come on, see the sights. Have a balloon. Feed the elephants. Ride the chutes. Oh, you like it. And oh, Ben, how you'll float. And in spite of his fear, Ben found that part of him did want a balloon. Who in all the world owned a balloon which would float into the wind? Who had ever heard of such a thing? Yes, he wanted a balloon, and he wanted to see the clown's face, which was bent down toward the ice, as if to keep it out of that killer wind. What might have happened if the 5 o'clock whistle atop to the right town hall hadn't blown just then? Ben didn't want to know. The important thing was that it did blow, a nice peak of sound drilling into the deep winter cold. The clown looked up, as if startled, and Ben saw its face. The mummy! Oh my God, it's the mummy! Was his first thought, accompanied by a swoony horror that caused him to clamp his hands down viciously onto the bridge's railing to keep from failing. Of course, it hadn't been the mummy, couldn't have been the mummy. Oh, there were Egyptian mummies, plenty of them. He knew that. But his first thought had been that it was the mummy. The dusty monster played by Boris Karloff in the old movie he had stayed up late to watch just last month on Shock Theater. No, it wasn't that mummy. Couldn't be. Movie monsters weren't real. Everyone knew that, even little kids, but it wasn't makeup the clown was wearing, nor was the clown simply swaddled in a bunch of bandages. There were bandages, most of them around its neck and wrists, blowing back in the wind, but Ben could see the clown's face clearly. It was deeply lined, the skin a parchment map of wrinkles, scattered cheeks, arid flesh. The skin of its forehead was split but bloodless. Dead lips grinned back from a maw in which teeth leaned like tombstones. Its gums were pitched and black. Ben could see no eyes, but something glittering far back in the charcoal pits of those puckered sockets. Something like the gold jewels in the eyes of Egyptian scarab beetles. And although the wind was the wrong way, it seemed to him that he could smell cinnamon and spice, rotting cerements treated with weird drugs, sand, blood, so old it had dried to flakes and grains of rust. We all float down here, the mummy clown croaked. And Ben realized with fresh horror that somehow it had reached the bridge. It was now just below him, reaching up with a dry and twisted hand from which flaps of skin rustled like venoms. A hand through which bone like yellow ivory showed. One almost flesh finger caressed the top of his boot. Ben paralysis broke. He pounded the rest of the way across the bridge with the 5 o'clock whistle still shrieking in his ears. It only ceased as he reached the far side. It had to be a mirage. Had to be. The clown simply could not have came so far during the whistle's 10 or 15 seconds blast. But his fear was not a mirage, neither were the hot tears which spurted from his eyes and froze on his cheek a second later after being shed. He ran, boots thudding on the sidewalk, and behind him he could hear the mummy in the clown suit climbing up from the canal. ancient stony fingernails scraping across iron, old tendons cracking like dry hinges. He could hear the aerial whistle of his breath pulling in and pushing out of nostrils as devoid of moisture as the tunnels under the Great Pyramid. He could smell its shroud of sandy spices, and he knew that in a moment its hands, as fleshy as the geometrical constructions he made with erector set, would descend upon his shoulders. They would turn him around and he would stare into that wrinkled smiling face. The dead river of its breath would wash over him. Those black eye sockets with their deep glowing depths will bend over him. The toothless mouth will yawn, and he will have his balloons. Oh yes, all the balloons he wanted. But he reached the corner of his own street, sobbing and winded, his heart slamming crazed, leaping hits into his ears. When he at least looked back over his shoulder, the street was empty. The arched bridge, with its low concrete sides and old-fashioned cobblestone paving, was also empty. He could not see the canal itself, but he felt that if he could, he would see nothing there either. No, if the mummy had not been a hallucination or a mirage, if it had been real, it would be waiting under the bridge, like the troll in the story of the three billy goats' grove. Under, hiding under. Ben hurried home, looking back every few steps until the door was safely shut and locked behind him. He explained to his mother, who was so tired from a particularly hard day at the mill that she had not in truth much missed him, that he had been helping Mrs. Douglas count books. Then he sat down to a dinner of noodles and Sunday's leftovers turkey. He stuffed 3 helpings into himself, and the mummy seemed more distant and dreamlike with each helping. It was not real. Those things were never real. They came fully to life only between the commercials of a late night TV movies or during the Saturday matinees, where if you were lucky you could get 2 monsters for a quarter, and if you had an extra quarter you could buy all the popcorn you could eat. No, they were not real. TV monsters and movie monsters and comic book monsters were not real. Not until you went to bed and couldn't sleep. Not until the last 4 pieces of candy wrapped in tissues and kept under your pillow against the evils of the night were gobbled up. Not until the bed itself turned into a lake of frenzied dreams and the wind screamed outside and you were afraid to look at the window because there might be a force there, an ancient green face that had not rotted but simply dried like an old leaf, its eyes sunken diamonds pushed deep into dark sockets. Not until you saw one ripped and claw-like hand holding a bunch of balloons. See the sights, have a balloon, feed the elephants, ride the chutes, bend open, how you float. Oh, and that's it for today. 45 minutes in, we read 2 chapters. Remember, if you want to find this video on YouTube, type !it_2.11. It will give you the YouTube link. Also, if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe for free using your Twitch Prime monthly option. If not, you can subscribe to this channel by paying $4.99 with a credit card or any other electronic payment means. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Boianover, top left side of top left corner of the screen. You'll see how it's spelled out. Also, you can join the Discord channel. The information is down below. The link, you'll find it by clicking an image that says Discord, clearly Discord. So yeah, that was it for today. I'll leave the bots up. This video is probably going to be on YouTube tomorrow. Today is November 10th. So yeah, if you're watching this any date after this one, you'll find it on YouTube. Thanks for accompanying me, thanks for following me, thanks for supporting the stream. See you guys soon, probably tomorrow. Bye.